Who?
Good afternoon, everyone. This week's parsha, in fact, a major part of the Chumash of Vayikra deals with korbanot, which to us is a very foreign subject. It's hard for us to associate ourselves. There's been no Beit HaMikdash, unfortunately, for over 1900 years. And the entire concept of animal sacrifices in the Western world is not known anymore. In the Muslim world, it still exists. And in other societies also, it still exists. But in the Western world, it's a completely foreign concept. And the Meforshim that deal with it, already beginning at the time of the Ramban, already in the Middle Ages, saw in it other levels of understanding aside from the literal understanding. And the Ramban famously says that korban chatos, korban olah, korban osham, those are sin offerings. Well, the olah was brought every day, so that was a different type of offering. But the chatos and the osham, that was brought to atone for something that was done incorrectly. And so then there's a question that arises, the philosophical question. If we can never undo the past, we can never erase the words that were said or the deeds that were performed. We can sublimate them, we can forget about them, we can feel sorry about them, but we can't erase them. So one of the gifts that the Lord has given us is that we have the power of tshuva, the power to be really sorry about it. Not just an expression of an apology, but the real regret. There are very few times in life that a person achieves real regret. Most of the time, our being sorry is only half-hearted. It's more surface than interior. The famous story with Rabbi Chaim Samzer, the Divrei Chaim, who was a very, very strong personality. The founder of the Samzer dynasty. He was a great Gaon, but he was involved in many, many controversies in his rabbinic career. And there was a famous machlokes between the House of Rishon, Sadigor, and the House of Sanz, that for 50 years roiled all of the Jews of Galicia. So unfortunately, when there are such disputes, people say things, write things, do things, because then it becomes l'shem shamayim, so then you're allowed to do things. And there was absolutely violence that occurred. But then when things quieted down, they simmered down a little. So one of the perpetrators of actions and letters against him came to him and asked, he apologized. He asked to be forgiven. So the Rebbe said, if you really apologize, I'll forgive you. He said, Rebbe, I came to apologize. I'm apologizing. He said, no. He told him a Polish saying that the Jews in Galicia used to say, you have to pull out a rib from you. That's an apology. Short of that, it's only, socha b'chutz. So he said, if you don't really mean it, so then this is an exercise in futility. So the Ramban says, again, when he looks at korbanos, especially the chatos and the osham, so he says, in reality, the person should himself lie down on the altar. He should be the victim for what he did. But the Torah doesn't allow that to happen. We don't have, God forbid, human sacrifice. So therefore, this animal, the sheep or the goat or the bull or that is brought, that's, so to speak, our surrogate, our substitute. But the person that brings the korban has to have that feeling that it's really him. It's not the animal. And he brings it from the pasuk. The pasuk in Vayikra, right at the beginning of the parsha. Odom ki yakriv mikem korban l'Hashem. So the word mikem, it should be Odom ki yakriv korban l'Hashem. What's mikem? From you. So he says mikem, from you, means that it's you. You're the korban l'Hashem. And that's a feeling. So even though we don't have korbanot today, and to a great extent we have attempted to make tefillah the substitute for korbanot, the shalma porim svatenu, our lips should be, instead of the animals that we brought, but it requires a sincerity. And we all know that it's difficult to maintain sincerity in prayer. It's an eternal struggle. And we go through it every time we engage in prayer. But the person has to realize that a certain amount of sincerity is necessary. It's not just reading the words. So it has to be mikem. It has to be a piece of you. And that is a challenge that Jews face 3 times a day. Because otherwise, it's mitzvahs anoshim u'meretz. It's just rote, it's habit. Once heard a Maggid in Chicago, he said that when a Jew backs up from Shemoneh Esrei, you can give him Shalom Aleichem because he's been all over the world. Because it's hard to concentrate. They say that one of the Polish noblemen asked one of the Kotzker Chassidim, what's so great about the Rebbe of Kotsk that everybody runs to him and everything? What's his greatness? The Chassid answered that the Rebbe of Kotsk has the ability to concentrate for 3 hours on end. most people, 3 minutes is pretty much the limit. Because it requires, it's as exhausting as physical effort. To think about something. Rabbi Soloveitchik has an anecdote that he says about Reb Chaim, his grandfather, and that he said that sometimes he thought about the difficulty in the Talmud or in the Rambam, and to the extent that he got a headache, he had to put compresses on his forehead. So strained was he from the concentration. So that's one thing, Mikem, that the Ramban points out. There's a second thing that the Meforshim also point out that says in the Pasuk, L'Somchem. The only time a korban works is when it's voluntary. When you wanted it to happen. And L'Somchem again is your inner ratzon, your inner drive. So not that you do it so others should see what you're doing. And not that you should do it because you're forced to do it. Or because it's politically correct. It has to be l'rtzonechem. When I was a child in Chicago, so there was an election that was held on the Chol Hamoed Pesach, a municipal election. And there was a neighbor of ours who was running for office. He was one of the candidates. So he was not a religious Jew at all. But before Pesach, he made a very great show of buying matzah and getting ready for Pesach and everything, because he wanted the vote of the religious Jews. And he lost the election. And when he lost the election, he took the boxes of matzah and he threw them out in the street. And he says, who needs these crackers? So, and if he would have won the election, he would have kept the crackers. So that's not l'tzonechem. That's a sham. That is play acting. And that's what Chazal meant when they said, Rachmana liba boy. Rebbeinu Shalom wants us. You know, forget about the show. The show is for somebody else. What about you? And that's reflected in these words, in that it has to be mikem and it has to be l'tzonechem. And those are two very, very difficult challenges. But simply in realizing that those challenges exist, so you're halfway there. When people put a lot of concentration on behavior, as they should, it doesn't help to think about the mitzvah if you don't do it. You can think about the grandeur of matzah for all the time, but you have to eat the kazayas on the night of the Seder. But you should realize that doing it is not the whole thing. It's not the complete picture. There's another element completely that the Torah wants from us. And that we should think of ourselves in that light. And if we do so, then the mitzvah itself acquires a different tone. The matzah acquires a different flavor. It's not crackers anymore. So those are two words in this week's parsha that have definite relevance and importance for us. Odom ki yakiv mikem korban l'Hashem l'rtzonechem tizbochu. And that applies even when we don't have animal sacrifices. We still don't have the Beit HaMikdash, and the entire subject may be foreign to us, but these challenges are real, we understand them. And because of that, therefore, we should try to deal with them to the extent that we can.
Yeah, usually around 10, 13.
I hear you zooming, you can be efficient with this.